Let's just go ahead and get started. Yeah, hi. I see some familiar faces in the crowd from my talk yesterday. As necessary, I will try to not repeat myself. But if people want me to sort of recover stuff, if you weren't here last time, I'm happy to do that. Just as a reminder, my name is John. I'm an engineering manager for B2C. And what we're going to talk about here, again, it's going to be pretty basic stuff for those who are already familiar with B2C. But if you're not, you're in the right place. We're going to be talking about how to manage identity providers, and if we have time, we'll also talk about sort of application management, how to sort of keep yourself sort of as clean as possible, remove permissions you don't need, such like that. Just in case there are things we miss, there are some pretty good samples. I'm going to, of course, deviate from them a little bit for the purposes of this talk, but for the stuff we don't cover, there's pretty good documentation online. Yeah, I guess that's the thing I just said, so we'll talk about identity providers. I'm also going to talk a little bit about protocols, just talking about the different things we support on sort of both ends of the RP IDP fence. We'll walk through adding a built-in provider, adding a custom provider through a custom policy, how to gain more claims from the IDPs. So if you want to get the profile pic from Facebook, I'll kind of walk through that. We'll talk about how to sort of some very simple, quick tips and tricks for how to speed up the authentication process if on your side you already know stuff about what the user wants to do. Then we'll, again, if time allows, we'll talk over some authentication flows and some application stuff. Cool. So to start with, supported protocols. So as you probably have heard, we've really embraced OpenID Connect and its, I guess, older cousin OAuth 2. For the relying party side on the left, we've sort of leaned pretty hard into OpenID Connect. If you want to use SAML, come talk to us. We can probably make that happen for you. We have some customers using SAML on the RP side in sort of a preview mode. On the relying party side, we do OAuth 2, OpenID Connect, and SAML 2. A smattering of other things in preview. If your protocol is not on that list, please talk to me. But one of the things we do on this right side is normalize a lot of what these protocols say. I mean, obviously, they're all speaking literally different languages. But on the OpenID Connect side, all you really cared about is what claims do I really possess. SAML has crazy assertions. OAuth 2 has its own unique way of talking about what a claim is, even between different providers of the same type. Like Facebook might call the email claim emails. Twitter might call it email singular, and if you just want to, through our policies, we can normalize the name. So on the relying party side, you're just dealing with a very simple set of claims, less code for you to write, in exchange for having to do a little bit of XML. Cool. So with that, I'm just going to jump right into it. Let's set up some custom identity providers. Just some slides in case, as a dev and someone who gives presentations occasionally. Sometimes the internet doesn't work, so I have some slides about what we will, sometimes what we'll see, and kind of go over it real quick, and then we'll do it live. So adding a built-in social provider is pretty easy. Basically, you just, out of band, you would set up, your Facebook or Google or Twitter or LinkedIn provider through whatever process it is that they have. All we really want at the end of the day is your client ID and your client secret. That way, we could communicate to Facebook as if we were you. And there's an important reason why we do that. There is no sort of B2C master Facebook app that we're using. We're asking you to give us your Facebook ID and secret. So that two reasons. One is when the user is redirected to Facebook and tries to log in, they're going to see a consent prompt of some kind, right? Saying, hey, do you allow blank company to access your name and profile and picture and whatever. We want that to be your company, right? We don't want people to say, okay, all B2C apps can now see my Facebook stuff. We want to say, it's your stuff. That way your EULA, your icons and stuff like that show up as well. It also means that you can access Facebook Graph and gain information about the users because they consented to you, not us. Hopefully that makes sense. Is there any questions about that? Because sometimes you do say, why do I have to make my own Facebook app? That's the reason why. Exactly. We'll just hand everyone a copy of the same key, and you guys seem like nice people. We'll trust you. Also, this is how you do the same thing. Oh, wait, well, this is kind of skipping ahead a bit. I'll just jump into the demo. Cool. So again, in custom, built-in, this is super simple. You just basically go to the identity providers tab. The internet is slow here, which is why I was panicking earlier, and now went to a blank page because it lost connection. And now IE froze. See, this is why we have pre-made slides. Great. What I'll do is I'll rely on the hotel Wi-Fi instead. That'll trick them. Aha, apparently the hotel Wi-Fi is better than the wired connection. It's slower, but it works. Or maybe it doesn't. Okay. If this takes terribly much longer, I'll just go back to my slides and just talk about them for longer. Great, we're back. So, after some delay, so this is the set of social providers and built-in that I've already configured. So I basically have already made a Google and a Facebook app. If I wanted to add, say, a LinkedIn one, it's pretty easy. Just go here. Here's a list of providers I haven't configured yet. Click LinkedIn. Just for the sake of speed, I'm going to enter in a random client ID and secret. So obviously this app won't actually work, but it'll show up. Cool. So now this IDP is available to my tenant, and I just have to go to whatever built-in policies I already have and add that identity provider as a valid IDP for that policy. Let's go ahead and add it here. See, now LinkedIn is available. Give that a save. Cool, and you can see LinkedIn is now available. Again, since I entered a random client ID and secret, it won't work if I click the button, but if you had set up a LinkedIn app, it would work. Custom is a little bit trickier, but we'll talk through it anyway. Oh, sure. Talk to me again in like a month or two. I don't want to promise a hard date, but we are working on a. Good enough to say if it's in plan. Oh, totally. Yeah, like I think in one of the other sessions we probably are we covering? Are we talking about roadmap for programmatic API?
Yeah, so we talked about it yesterday. It's in the works and it'll be part of MS.
Right. So you just make like a no data call and say some property name, Facebook, blah. What, we still have prizes? Cool. So if you want to ask easy questions, feel free to give you awarded a prize. So actually, what I'm going to walk through for custom IDPs is kind of a scenario that a couple other people were talking to me about yesterday. I figured it was a good idea to just walk through it. So we're going to walk through the process of adding an AED premium tenant, like a business to employee style tenant. There's a couple apps that, maybe you're a gym and you say, well, if you log in with your work account, you can log in that way, right? And maybe you want to say, okay, like Microsoft I'm thinking of it, my actual gym. Microsoft, Nintendo, and Amazon. If you're one of those employees, you could log in with your employee credentials, and that's how you get into the gym. What we're taking advantage of here is the fact that AAD Premium is itself an OpenID Connect compliant provider. So we're just going to add it here. In many ways, it's going to be analogous to adding Facebook, right? So there's no, I guess you could say, special connection we have to AAD Premium in this sense. When you log in with your AAD Premium account, we'll create a B2C account in your actual B2C directory. They're not linked in any magical way other than the fact that you're using one to log into the other. Does that make sense? Cool. So basically, this is it. It's a little complicated. So I'm going to walk through each particular section. So we've added a new claims provider. We've given the claims provider a domain. I called it contoso.com because I wanted to be on Microsoft branding. We'll say that the protocol is OpenID Connect. It outputs a JOT. And we're going to put in here a link to the metadata for my AAD Premium tenant. I have a terrible memory, so I just called myself Sipam John, not B2C, which so that way I know it's the business one. It's not the B2C tenant. And you just put in the client ID, and then you could also see I added the secret. I did that before just because I didn't want to waste everyone's time here. But this is similar, I guess, to like setting up your Facebook account. As I set up my AAD provider, I got a client ID and a client secret out of that. Other things is you notice there's a few claims that this provider outputs. You could actually change that to give more or different claims, but they would be the AAD Premium claims. Cool. And then going down, I'll just kind of follow along this profile ID. So this is the equivalent of the first step I did for built-in, which is getting the client ID and secret and configuring it for your tenant. And then you would add it to whatever particular policy flows you wanted to. So here is the user journey. Again, for those already familiar with custom, hopefully this is review. If not, welcome to custom policies. But you can see that this is the sign up or sign in user journey. Step one is offering the user selection of buttons. So this one says Facebook, the new Contoso one I just added, and the local account-based one, which is like the email address and password. And step two is to potentially go to Facebook or Contoso based off of what the user clicked. Sure.
So I missed the earlier meeting that my purposes.
No worries.
When we're talking about the custom claims provider, you have it here bundled in with the user's journey. Is that something that when I do a custom policy, is the claims part of the policy, or can I do the claims by itself and then kind of use the UI for the rest of it?
Great. Sorry. Could you repeat your question?
So the claims provider is that XML blob it defines. That
No, the one above.
Just about right
Sure.
now we're into the user journey, so I'm wondering, can I just do the claims part by itself and then use the UI with the generic user journey?
Oh, I see.
Or do I have to build it, or because I want the AAD, I have to do everything?
You sort of have to do everything because, well, in a nutshell, like the built-in policies kind of lives in its own policy hierarchy.
Okay.
So your custom one lives separately. The reason why we do that is you could say that you own the policies for whatever custom sort of policy hierarchy you build in yourself is yours to own and control. But as Microsoft, we change the root B2C policy all the time for no reason, and we just make sure that hey, old policies still work. I mean, not for no reason, we do it to add features. But as we do that, we'll test to make sure like, hey, old policies through our UI work. All the UI still works the way we expect. But if you took some dependency on something we didn't expect that our UI wouldn't let you do, we would break you without knowing.
Right.
So that's why we sort of keep them separate.
Okay. So that virtue of that, so maybe in this case, I would have been only interested in claims provider. I have to sort of get everything.
That's true. But the good news, so two good news is for that. Yes, it is complicated. I'm not going to lie and say that it's easy. But we have a starter pack for you. Literally, I pulled that from the starter pack.
I mean, yeah, this particular case is actually one that I think I need to build.
Right. So yeah, if you go on GitHub, there's a starter pack that you can just literally copy paste and this replace 2 or 3 values.
Yeah.
Also, if you go to our samples online, it'll also tell you like replace these specific 3 ones for the base case, and then do whatever special nonsense you want on top of that.
Okay.
Cool.
Given OIDC is so central, why isn't OIDC one of the supported
Oh, I see. I'm going to, since everyone here is under NDA, I'm going to briefly fly by something that I totally shouldn't show, and I almost wasn't being recorded. But if I were to click this identity provider button here, you might notice it says, oh, you have no custom identity providers here. And if I click this add button, there's this weird custom identity provider thing. So that's not in prod yet. So pretend you don't see it. But I can tell you it's on our roadmap, and we'll probably be giving it to you in the near future. And then your question would be answered. Yeah, I can't give you an exact timeline right now. Because I'm a dev, I have weird things enabled in my tenant that shouldn't show up. But yeah, sorry. But yes, at least when I tell you it's on a roadmap, like that's hopefully a believable thing. That I didn't just like totally waste my time and implement some UI for no reason. Yeah, exactly. It's like, haha, I know how to fool them. I'll just make some UI mockery. And but yes, again, I can't give exact timelines. There's the whole testing process and deployment and all that other stuff. So cool. Going back to this guy. Actually, I think I was just about done. So yeah, you add the one step to talk about the button and one step to actually go there. And so I'll just show you what this looks like. Again, like any good baker, I already uploaded the one just in case the unexpected happens. So if I go here. Click run now. So this is a sort of in my same tenant, another hierarchy of custom policies I've made. For this one, I only added Facebook and this Contoso employee, which is going to connect to my AED premium tenant. So I'm going to click this and hopefully. Now you might notice that I logged in and I didn't have to actually log into my B2C, my employee tenant. There's a reason why. So I made my Microsoft corporate account, like the thing that I'm logged into this computer as a guest user in my tenant. So when I clicked the button, you might have seen a brief white flash as I technically redirected, and their SSO logic kicked in, noticing that I was logged in with my corporate creds on the computer. So that's why you just went along. I thought it looked cooler to demo it that way, but if I wasn't logged in with my corporate creds or I didn't have a guest user, you would have seen the login screen to actually say, okay, what is your username and password to this employee tenant? Cool. Was there any questions? I thought I saw one. Nope. Someone's scratching their head. Great. Yes? Oh, yes. So basically, this is actually worth showing, so I'll just jump back and show. So this works in the same way that most of our, I'm not duplicating anymore. So this works the same way most of our UX customization did. Actually, I think later today, Vinu's giving a talk on how to customize this UI. It's literally right now? Well, you guys picked, no, okay. I'm glad you all are here. So basically, what we do is you could overlay your own CSS on top of the page, which I think you probably already know because you're more familiar. The trick, though, is that these, for those who may not be aware, even though we make the default experience look very Microsoft-ish, we want to be able to say, hey, if you're a Real Madrid or if you have a very specific experience, you could add your own CSS to every page and change the whole look and feel, including our buttons on the inside. So since your CSS is overlaid on us, we basically give our buttons predictable IDs. So that way you could say, the ID, the Facebook tag is going to be green instead of blue. By the way, I don't think Facebook allows you. They have icon things. But the ID for this is also predictable based off of the claims exchange ID in the policy. So if I were to,
So this is the default look. You guys aren't using the new experience for the default look.
What was that?
You guys aren't using the new experience for the default look right now. The new AAD.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes, no, we aren't. In fact, like again, just as a full disclosure kind of thing, there's one of the debate topics in our team has been how good do we want the default look to be, because we want you to customize it, right? We had a couple customers go live thinking like, oh, this is just how it looks, it's good enough, like totally ignoring like one of our main selling point features, which is you can change it to make it look like your website instead of ours. So we'll probably still update it, but we're not going to try super hard to make it look like beautiful, amazing, because we want it to be your experience, not ours.
So actually right now, we do have a template that you can use to make your experience better using more modern techniques that are available. See the recording for that session or
But just jumping through, like, so when this button has this ID in CSS, which is based off of the ID in the policy. So if you could just make sure that those IDs stay the same, and you could make your own CSS make the button look different. Cool. That's not what extending looks like. Oh, sure. I can show you that. I wasn't planning on to, but it's right there. Still struggling to make this project the way I want it to. I'll just drag it over and look myself. Wow, that's small. Okay, let's fix how I'm projecting. For anyone who didn't bring their, cool looking monocle. All right, looks a little better. Huh? All right, a little better. Is this readable, or I can zoom in more? Is it? All right, cool. So yeah, basically, if you just this page is sort of the custom policy hub for your policy. You see this if you've actually linked a subscription to your tenant. So if you're still freeloading off of us, you can't see this page. But but we have a significant free tier, so you can still experiment while you do it. What was that? I can't on my tenant for unrelated reasons.
You get to this when you click on Identity Experience on the B2C page.
All right.
You don't click if you have your subscription link. It will only be enabled, otherwise we figure it out.
So yeah, this is kind of the hub for this. There's some links to our forum, our samples, and docs and such. But under this tab right here are the policy keys. So some of the ones in my tenant will be, I think so, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, not only do we have a free tier, but if you got like an MSDN subscription with like however many free credits we give, you'll. So anyway, yeah, so some of these secrets aren't necessarily related to this demo, but you can see that for example, for this AAD Premium app secret, it's not showing the key, but it is showing what keys exist in that container. Hmm? Oh wow, that's like a nice one. Okay, that's forever gives me the question I'm most easily able to answer. So next we're going to walk through how to configure one of the existing providers. So just for the sake of this, I'm going to take my custom policy that already works with Facebook, and I'm going to add the ability to get the profile picture, which is something we don't have in B2C in general, or in the built-in policies, which there's actually a reason for that too. The way Facebook works is the more and more claims you ask for, the more and more consent you have to give, which is great, but we don't. We want that to be an intentional choice, right? We don't want to just blindly ask for defaults, all kinds of things that you may need. This way you can configure as well. I know in my app I need a profile picture, so I'm just going to ask for just those sets of claims. That way the consent screen is minimal and less scary. This is just what it's going to look like. Actually, this is literally the whole thing, so I'll just hang out here. So for those of you who might have seen my talk yesterday about how to add a custom claim, basically I've added one. You know what? I'll just show it because there are some pieces. Cool, so for those of you who might remember me adding this loyalty ID claim last time as an extension attribute to the graph, I've also added one now for picture, which is just the picture in Facebook. You'll notice it's awkwardly a string data type because the way Facebook gives you this claim is it gives you back a string that's the URL for the picture, which also makes the claim not be as gigantic, which is actually good. But that's why it's not some other type besides string. Following along, you can see that I've added this as an output claim to my Facebook profile. This is also an example of this claim mapping I was talking about. So you can see here, Facebook calls this claim picture, but in the rest of my policy, I call this extension underscore picture just to demonstrate that there is this mapping you can do. And in this metadata section, you could see besides the normal stuff about where Facebook's URLs live, there's also this metadata tag for the scope. So Facebook sort of labels the profile picture as part of your public profile. So you have to ask for the public profile scope in order to get it. And then at the claims endpoint, you have to list the claims, the specific claims you're looking for, and that's why you can see pictures here on the right. And that should actually do it. Going to my leaf policy in my custom, my sort of custom hierarchy, you'll also notice that I've added this extension underscore picture as an output claim of my leaf policy. So the actual token I get back should now contain this claim. Oh, sorry, wrong tab. Cool. So again, I'm going to click the Facebook link. I'm already logged in through, so Facebook's going to SSO me. And here I am back. And ta-da, there's this extension underscore picture claim that contains the URL for my profile. And just to show that I'm not fooling anyone, I'll actually go there. And that's apparently Facebook not having the best day. Maybe I'll try in Chrome. Cool. Well, slightly before this meeting, oh, it's because I had a trailing slash. Sorry. Cool. So it's incredibly low resolution and tiny, but that's my profile picture of me in Scotland, I think. Anyway, there it is. Cool. So jumping back to our demo, or sorry, our slides. Haha. Oh, and yeah, this is my just in case slide. If the internet wasn't working, you could see that there's a claim at the bottom. So next, I'm just going to cover two quick little mini features, I guess, that might make your authentication flows a little more seamless if you happen to already know some information about the user before you call us. So first, I'm going to talk about login hint. This one's pretty simple. So login hint is, I believe, an OpenID Connect standard parameter. It's literally a hint about what the username might be. So if for whatever reason in your app the user's logging in, but you happen to know that their username will be, JRI at Microsoft, which is my alias if you want to contact me about things after the show. So it's just it's an extra query parameter at the end of your authorized URL. Let's go ahead and quickly show you what it looks like. I'm sure there'll be no surprises. Cool, and yeah, easy enough. Just it's already pre-filled my email address just to make the user have to less to type if you happen to somehow already know that's what the username is.
Would that work?
Oh, no?
Would that work on if you had a sign up policy?
Yes. Actually, this one is a sign up or sign in policy. So this one.
But you can't. I want to pre-populate the sign up process because I already know something. So it's my understanding that you can't get, even though you use this unified one, you can't get directly to the sign up.
Oh, I see.
You have to have your own dedicated
Sign up only. Yes, that is true. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's a way around that other than just using a sign up only policy.
So let's assume I am using that. I can still pre-populate the sign up. Like
I'm 80% sure that that's yes. If not, let's talk because that should totally work.
And then would it be, did you use any of the other attributes that you requested, like shoe size? Did I pre-populate the shoe size?
So that you can't do. Again, I'll sort of say, because you're all under NDA and you all seem trustworthy, there is another feature in OpenID Connect that we're looking to support in the near future called ID token hint, which you sort of, if you have a collection of information you already know about the user to be true, and you have some mechanism of signing it so we know that it's not someone trying to fool us, you could send us an ID token that's basically a set of claims that you already know to be true, and we'll sort of pre-populate that into the user journey. Again, not available yet, but is something on our roadmap. It's actually in a similar state to what I showed before, which is like, it's like partially implemented already. But you won't see it in prod for probably a while. This is also, in the background, I'm like, man, I sure hope my boss isn't watching as I'm making all kinds of crazy promises. Cool, so domain hint is pretty similar. So this would be how to sort of pre-select Facebook or Google or Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever if you already know that's the user's IDP. This is actually pretty common if you have like a website where you might say on your page itself before redirecting to us, you might have something say sign in with Facebook, Google, blah 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 blah. And if they click the Facebook icon, you might know well then they probably want to sign in with Facebook. So you can skip past our page where we're just going to ask them again. So in built-in, it's pretty simple. You just do domain hint equals facebook.com, and we'll say, sure, we'll move you right along to Facebook. That also gives the nice benefit of if they're also SSO'd into Facebook, there's a good chance they'll see no UI at all. For custom, it's the same concept. If you remember when I was showing you the, I'll just back up to it. So if you remember when we were setting this up, we said, I said the domain for this was contoso.com. So that basically becomes your domain hint for this provider. Later on, if you're using the domain hint, you just use what you've configured as the domain, and that's what the hint will be. So again, just some quick brain dead showing of what this looks like.
I have a question on the domain hint.
Sure.
Is there a way to store that in the user profile that this user preferred Facebook so that when he comes on the login page, somehow we can get back to Facebook, or it's up to the user to bookmark that URL and get it?
Oh, it's a good question. So I'll answer it in two parts. So looking at one of the claims, which maybe oops, no, I don't want that. If I'm lucky, I still have one of these tabs open. Cool. So this is just some random token I happened to have earlier. If you noticed, I configured this policy. There's this IDP claim right here, which is facebook.com. So I guess you could say if your code is smart enough to understand that this is their domain, you could construct your authorized URL to have this already pre-filled in, at which point we would blindly follow it. But in terms of having a cookie stored on our side, if you are SSO'd, this is part of our SSO logic as well. So if the user is previously authenticated with our site and they've dropped a cookie and you've configured SSO to allow them to log in silently again and it's not expired, we'll log them in silently, remembering that they previously chose Facebook and bounce them right on to the end. Of course, if all of those statements are not, if one of those conditions is not true, they'll see the page, yeah. Cool, so if I remember correctly, cool, so this is just the domain hint with facebook.com. Same thing, you should see a white flicker as we direct to B2C, and then Facebook, and then back to B2C, and then to this site that just logged us back in. And then same exact thing for this custom one I showed you earlier. So this is, again, going to B2C. It's saying I want to use my employee credentials. Then it's logging me in silently with my employee credentials, and then it'll go back to the site. The URL I've used has disabled SSO. That's why you're seeing the flicker happen so quickly. If I had left SSO enabled, this would have been only one flicker because we would remember that you had gone to these previous places before. And that's probably me putting the wrong URL. Yeah. Cool. This is, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about applications. There's less to show and more to tell here just because this is kind of less feature, more common mistake we see people make. So again, it's something Microsoft's working on, but we confusingly have 3 different app registration portals right now. And 2 of them will work, and 1 of them will work best. So for B2C applications, which is most likely the ones you're going to be looking to make, if you go to our blade on the Azure portal, those are the ones we're setting up for you sort of behind the scenes. There's also V1 AAD premium apps. There's this notion in the, all right. I'm not sure if any of you have read XKCD before. Some people, I'm seeing some nods. So there's this one comic that's, problem statement. There are, 18 competing definitions for a standard. Then the next one is, I know, I'm going to make one standard that unifies them all. And then the next problem is there are now 19 competing standards. Going farther back in the Microsoft timeline, there used to be much more. There used to be like Microsoft accounts and Azure Active Directory accounts, and I guess before we bought them, LinkedIn accounts, and so forth and so on. So there were all these different types of apps that were themselves completely different structurally. So Microsoft said, "Cool, we'll rev our sort of application format. We'll have one that works across the board." But now there's we of course still support the individual formats. B2C only uses the converged type. So that's why if you go to the regular Azure AD portal and configure a V1 app there, we won't notice that it's there because we're only looking for V2 these converged style of V2 apps. You could also configure your V2 apps through identity.microsoft.com, which is, you might say, the MSA portal. Technically, we work with those too, but you'd have to know a little bit more about what the default options are to pick for each type of application. In our portal, we kind of pre-select certain permissions for you just because we know you're going to end up using them. But anyway, a lot of people get confused by that. That's why we did it. We did it with the best of intentions. Another thing you might want to consider doing for your apps is to revoke permissions that you know you're not going to use. Just because if your app only uses ID tokens, if you remember my talk on ID versus access tokens yesterday, if you know you're only ever going to ask for ID tokens, you should remove the ability for your app to even request access tokens. Just good cleanliness stuff. I'm going to quickly walk through what that looks like. Cool. So again, going back to this B2C blade, go to applications. So let's say I have this app that I'll just call V2. Actually, I'll configure an app ID UI for this app, which means that it's possible for it to request access tokens. Oh, sorry, I was looking at the wrong blade. So if you look at this API access tab, which you guys can't see because the font is small, let me fix that. Better? Cool. So if you look at, when you create this app, we pre-fill a couple of permissions for your app to use. One is to sort of access the user's profile, which means that they could acquire refresh tokens and they could acquire ID tokens. But if you know that your app never uses refresh tokens, or you know that it never uses ID tokens, best to just remove the permission. Simple, but it's a kind of a easy hygiene things to miss. Does that make sense, or is there any questions there? I did a brief talk on what refresh ID tokens and access tokens are. If you missed that, it's recorded. Cool, simple enough. Oh, I also want to talk a little bit about native app redirect URLs and why they're important to configure. And actually, quick show of hands, just so I know that I'm not wasting people's time. When I say Pixie and OAuth, does anyone know what that means or why it's important? No one. That means I'll go over it. Cool. So it's particularly important for phone apps, which is, since it's such a popular scenario, I do think it's worth our time to go through, and we'll cover the rest if there's time. So just a little bit of review from yesterday. Sorry, I'm just going to go to my appendix real quick. So let's talk a little bit about refresh tokens for a second. There's multiple types of scenarios where you might use refresh tokens. One of them is when you have some sort of native or phone app. This is just a review of my deck from yesterday. So the native app might make some call to B2C. You'd get back an auth code, which is sort of a ticket for a refresh token. But notably, B2C redirects back to the phone, right? So when the user is done with their interaction, an auth code is generated, and it's sent to some URL available on the phone, or I should say URI available on the phone. And I'll get back to why that's an important thing in a second. So then what would happen next is the native app would, probably through some library, redeem that auth code back at the service and get back down a refresh token, which is a factory for making more ID tokens later. I also talked a little bit yesterday about why this refresh token is useful but dangerous to have if you're not supposed to have it. It's sort of a factory for making ID tokens potentially forever. So if someone steals the ID or access token, they're you for an hour. If someone steals your refresh token, they're you kind of forever. Until you know to revoke them, but a lot of users wouldn't know that happened. So I'm just going to point with my finger because the mouse doesn't work. So this redirects here, back where you take the auth code and send it back to the native application. Since it's an actual redirect, which is like a 302 in HTTP world, there's a chance for other apps that might live on the phone to intercept that, right? Imagine the user has has Outlook or has the Gmail app or whatever, and then an evil Gmail account that doesn't show up in the you never expect the user to actually click it and log in, but the app is secretly living there waiting to intercept these calls. So let's say that happens, right? And the app is just listening on the same redirect URI locally that your good app listens to. It steals the auth code, redeems the auth code on your behalf. The original app may or may not see some kind of error saying like, oh, the auth code was already redeemed by someone, and then some retry logic will probably kick in and you'll just quickly get another one, right? But then you don't know that this auth code has now been stolen and that there's some refresh token living in some other app that you don't control. So what PKCE, which stands for Proof Key for Code Exchange, there's an RFC on it if you're curious, it's PKCE, is meant to address this vulnerability, basically by having the native app generate a sort of one-time secret that it sends as part of the original authorized call. And then whoever redeems that auth code later on has to know what that secret was. And if they don't, then the redemption is rejected. So pretty simple concept, but because it's relatively new, I think it was ratified maybe a year and change ago. Not all libraries support using it. So anyway, long story short, actually I can quickly show you a demo of that. Here you go. So if we see this URL right here, I'll throw it into Notepad real quick. Oh, you guys can't see this. Whoops.
Does this work with any of the modern office apps?
It depends on what authentication library they're using. So MSAL supports it. I know that's true. Some of the older versions of 8al I know don't. And so for the specific ones, I think you'd have to check. Yeah, I don't offhand though. I could totally look that up for you. Yeah. Oh, wonderful, cool. Yeah. Could you maybe give me your contact information afterwards? Let me show this a little better. So it's kind of hard to see that. 1 second. Anyone know how to zoom in Notepad? No? All right. Oh, that works. Oh, really? Oh, okay. There you go. Sorry, you said Control Plus? No? I'm not. Oh, here we go. Cool. Thanks for bearing with me. So basically what I'm appending to this request is a code challenge. What this is it's a SHA-256 hash of some secret that my app, quote unquote, is building just for the purpose of this one call, right? So again, hopefully, I would not recommend doing this yourself. I would say use some library that supports PKCE. But what that library should do is generate a one-time secret every time you make an auth call looking for a code. And then sort of to the right, you'll see that you also specify the code challenge method, which is to say, hey, I'm sending up a SHA-256 hash of the secret rather than the secret itself. So if I just visit this, I hopefully will get SSO'd back in. Cool. So if I try to redeem this, again, this is just some site that I made that will just post things back. And I just send the wrong code verifier. Actually, did I click the right button? I don't think I did. Cool. So you can see that since I typed in the wrong code verifier, I just typed in some random characters. I got back an error saying the specified code verifier is invalid, which means that this would be my attempt for some evil app to redeem something that it shouldn't, and you can see that it fails. Any questions there? More or less get it? Cool. So we're running a little short on time, so I'm going to, again, throw it to you guys about what you'd like me to cover. So I could talk a little bit about how to set up access tokens with a resource app and a client app. Or I can go a little bit deeper into what the refresh token flow is like in case that whole mess where I skipped past a whole bunch of important details didn't seem good. Or I could talk about what the different types of applications in OAuth are so you know which one is right for you. Any strong preference? Sure. What was it? The apps? All right, cool. I heard more votes for that, so I'll do that, and if I have time, I'll go back to that. Cool. Cool. So in the Azure world, we support these 4 general categories of authentication flows. Each one has a very specific application and even though more than one might work for your app, there's usually one that was better for you to pick. So client credential is essentially for daemon apps. So it's good for if you're calling Graph API. So you have some service that just, there's no user interaction here. So you just have an application ID and a secret. And you have some app that you totally trust and is operating within your control completely, so no one bad ever touches it. And you could log in with the application's credentials and sort of explore Graph, right? So any user that may have consented to your app before, you can go view them. You can see how many users you have, how many users have shoe size greater than 7. Get specific claims for a specific user if you happen to know something. So that would be what client credential is for. You would sort of use your, again, another common mistake, you would use your AAD application for this. So if you, this is supported best in V1. So if you create an AAD V1 app and use it to explore AD graph, that's probably the best way to go. Your B2C app won't work for that, which is totally feedback that we've we've taken and what we're working on. Actually, I'm not sure if the V2 app works. You just can't use a B2C token for it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So the implicit flow. The implicit flow is, I guess what you might say is the easiest OAuth app. You can sort of get it running in a couple of minutes. In this one, the relying party makes a request to the IDP, which is B2C, saying response mode equals query, which means that you'll get the token back. Oh, no, sorry. Response type equals token, I should say. My mistake. So you'd say response type equals token, which means that you want B2C to give the ID token directly to whoever it's supposed to reply to. There's no auth code. There's no misdirection to anywhere else. Just the auth code just appears on the other side. That's in many cases. It's definitely the easiest flow. In many cases, it's good enough. There is a downside though. So in the implicit flow, the token passes through the client. So if that's either a browser or a library, that means that they could actually see the claim. So if you're running on an untrusted platform of some kind, like some browser that you might not trust for some reason, or more likely, if your claim has information you don't want the user to know about themselves, like, if one of your claims is you have platinum level status or you have bronze level status and you don't want your bronze users to feel bad about themselves, you maybe don't want that token with that claim to pass through the client. It's also susceptible to, I guess what you can say, DNS spoofing. So if you have some spa app on your machine and you're using the implicit flow, our service does, again, a 302 back to whatever your website is. But since that redirect happens on the client, if there's someone on your LAN who says, I'm Starbucks.com, and registers in your router that DNS entry, then your router will locally happily redirect back to that evil person on your LAN. So that's the reason why, hey, if the token you're giving is not super security critical anyway, maybe that's all right. That's a decision you have to make on your own. But it is vulnerable to that type of spoofing attack. Confidential client is the more difficult to use, but better version of the web flow for many cases. So in the confidential client flow, it uses that auth code refresh token thing that I mentioned earlier. But the code goes, instead of the token passing through and going to your app, to your web app, the auth code goes to your web app. So then your web app then redeems the auth code as a service-to-service call back to B2C and has to supply some client secret to know that it's a legitimate client on the other side. So we know to trust that call. That removes, obviously, this redirect, this DNS spoofing problem, because the only thing that is being sent through, the only thing that the evil Starbucks app would have in that case would be the auth code, which is not a token. And that evil app wouldn't be able to redeem that auth code because it doesn't know the secret that only your service knows. Does that make sense? I can go over that again because I said a lot of words really quickly there. Really? All right, cool. And then the public client is more akin to the web app, to the phone app one I was showing a diagram of earlier. That one is, it's another refresh token one, but the phone itself redeems the auth code for a refresh token. It previously was super dangerous because of the sort of evil local app case. Pixie makes it better, but it doesn't make it perfect. You really should only allow this if you know that it's okay for an app that you're writing to have access to a refresh token, that you can sort of keep that pond safe. And then, yeah, in a nutshell, those are the 4 different types of auth flows that B2C supports in the OpenID Connect OAuth world. I am exactly out of time. I can quickly talk about something else if you guys want to eat into your break, or I can answer questions.
So that PKC issue only really exists with public?
It works. So you could do Pixie with confidential client too. It's just that the problem it's mitigating is less important if you also have to know the client secret. Of course, you wouldn't want to use confidential client on a phone because you don't want to implant a secret that's permanent into your app, right? Right. So Pixie is trying to solve that gap problem. But yeah, it works on the service too. I don't want to say that it's not important because there might be some scenario that's not crossing my mind right now that Pixie would help there too. It's less of an issue, at least, I can tell you that. I don't want to be a Microsoft guy in a recorded presentation saying, but there's no reason to use it. Yeah, so I would say maybe you and I can just do some research or something. Okay. Cool. Any other questions? Awesome. Yeah, and just again, thank you. And again, if you have any feedback, feel free to leave it here. Again, positive and negative feedback welcome. If some of the feedback be made, it would be great if the presenter was sweating less. I would totally get that. Yeah, so, and if you didn't like the presentation for any reason, remember, no one likes a complainer, so. Please do leave us feedback. We can turn this into our next partner presentation. And actually, we did look at the feedback from yesterday. The feedback yesterday was go faster, so I tried to do that today. Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Cheers.